Hello and welcome back. This is the second module of the Social Change Model Leadership course, and today we're going to be focusing on what is social change. But before we get started, we're going to start off with our tradition. So every time we gather, we're going to start off by sharing celebrations. What are you celebrating this week? It could be something that you're celebrating as a learner in this course or in your leadership role. So at this point, I'm going to ask us to go around and everybody share a celebration. The thing that I am celebrating this week is that I'm feeling on top of my to-do list. Okay, Jane, can you go ahead and share your celebrations? And so we'll go around the room and people will share their celebrations, and then I'll explain that the reason why we share celebrations is because celebrations are really a form of gratitude, and gratitude physically alters our brain by releasing a chemical called dopamine. And dopamine really helps us as learners. It helps us feel less stressed, less anxious, happier, more creative, and more open to different approaches, thoughts, and ideas. So just make a note that we will be starting off each module by doing celebrations. And I hope that you'll enjoy thinking about what it is that you want to share each week as you prepare to come to class. So before we get started with the lecture, what I want you to do is turn to a partner and come up with a list of examples of how college students are making social change. How many examples can you think of? The chapter that you read for this week was on social change, so you should have a pretty good idea of what that concept is. But real quickly, turn to your partner and come up with a list of at least 5 ways that you have seen college students making social change, either here on our campus or maybe in the news. And so after a couple of minutes, I invite the class to come back together and ask them to share out, okay, what were some of those examples? And then I'll be prepared as the instructor to share some examples that I've seen in terms of college students maybe in their assistance in drawing attention to the Flint water crisis, or being involved with voter registration here on the CMU campus, providing some concrete examples of students that have started community service organizations during their time at CMU. So as we get ready to really dive into the material, I want to share with you what the game plan is for our time together. And so as a result of participating in this module, you're going to be able to define the key concepts related to social change, that you'll be able to describe your sphere of influence, and we'll talk more about that later on during this module, and that you'll be able to choose strategies for participating in social change related to an issue that's important to you. And so each time we come together, I will share the learning outcomes, but then I'll also share kind of a plan or agenda for our time together, just so you know that how this is going to progress. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to review key concepts from Chapter 1. We're going to take some time to really explore this concept of social change. And then just to make sure that you don't think that I'm going to be depositing all of this knowledge for you, we're going to take some time to do some activities. So you'll actually create a model of your sphere of influence. And then we're going to play with a concept called concept maps as we look at social change. And then I'm going to make sure that we wrap up in time that I can share some additional resources for you to continue your learning. Because I recognize that all of us come to this topic in a very different place of understanding, and I want to make sure that you feel prepared to progress forward with this course. And so I ask you to bring your textbook with you each time, and we touched a little bit upon this in the first class. And as a reminder, you were expected to read Chapter 1 for this module, and I am really excited about this book. While many of the leadership concepts in this book can be applied to a variety of contexts, such as leadership in the corporate business world, or politics, or maybe a work site, or student organization, this book was really written for college students who want to work with others to create change. So I think it's very applicable to the classroom environment. And then Chapter 1 explores issues related to the concept of social change. And if you remember from the reading, it touched on the motivations to get involved in social change, such as faith and one's ability to make a real impact, and as well as the potential pitfalls of doing this work. So let's start off with talking about some of the key concepts that were covered in this week's chapter. And so if you did the reading, these are going to look really familiar. And what I want you to do is pull out a sheet of paper And I'm going to ask you to write down a one-sentence summary for at least 4 of these key concepts. So you go ahead and you pick them, a one-sentence summary that really helps define what we mean by these concepts. And I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And now that you've had the opportunity to write down your one-sentence summaries, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and turn those papers in and move them forward. But let's start off with social change. Who feels like they've got a good idea for what that concept is? Excellent, right. So social change addresses each person's sense of responsibility to others and the realization that making things better for one pocket of society makes things better for society as a whole. How about root cause? Who felt comfortable with their definition here? Yeah, so root cause is the actual cause of a problem as opposed to the symptoms that are related or usually seen on the surface. Who can give me an example of that? Great. Yep, that's a great example. Okay, let's move toward collaboration. Collaboration, did anybody feel like they had a good grasp of this one? Yeah? Okay, well, working together with all the stakeholders to make change. Excellent. Marginality. Marginality is a term used to describe the sense that one's presence in a group or community is not valued, or that one's experiences or perspectives are not normal. How do we see this concept show up in the college campus environment? Or maybe how have you experienced this? Wow, thank you so much for sharing that example from your experience. Yep, I see that often as a teacher in the classroom. So this concept of Ubuntu really had a beautiful illustration in the chapter. And the passage reads that it's very difficult to render in a Western language. It speaks to the very essence of being human. It is to say that my humanity is caught up and inextricably bound up in yours. We belong in a bundle of life. We say a person is a person through other persons. A person with Ubuntu has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she or they belong in a greater whole and is diminished when others are humiliated or diminished. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, and then let's quickly get to the other two. Paternalism. That's this idea that father knows best attitude that implies an unequal relationship between two parties. So in this context, it refers to the unequal relationship between the person coming in to quote unquote fix the community. Sometimes we see that with service projects and how students engage in that they come in to fix but don't really understand the community. Another example of this would be the white savior complex. And then asset-based view is the perspective that identifies the assets of the community as opposed to the deficits, which is much more effective to create change by highlighting the positive aspects and focusing on those for change. So each week we will start off with key concepts from the chapters to make sure that you've got a good feel for those so that we can continue to dive in with the rest of the information. So let's get through a little more of the content so that we can get into some of the activities that I have planned for us today. But this chapter really was about what is social change. And social change addresses the root causes of problems. So in order to understand how to create social change, students first have to identify the root cause of that problem in order to be able to move forward with changing it. We need to keep in mind that this is a collaborative process. This is not about what I do alone. So one person cannot fix a major societal problem such as hunger or the Flint water crisis. So this section identifies that change comes through collaboration. So how do we build coalitions? And then finally, social change is not simple, right? So social change involves many people and many elements in order to help make that change happen. So this section addresses the complexity of the process that helps students gain a better understanding of that process. So now that we've talked about what social change is, what's the why? Why do people get involved with social change? What do you think? What are some of your ideas? Yep, exactly. So, there are lots of reasons for being involved with social change, and usually it relates to your own experience as a student. So a personal connection to the problem, or a connection to others. So others engage in social change because they see their connection to the others through acts of selflessness. Another reason why people get involved with social change has to do with an interconnectedness of community problems. So many see the problems that they face as connected to the problems that other people are facing and choosing to engage in social change for that reason. And then finally, one of the final reasons why people get involved is this idea of satisfaction derived from making a difference, right? It feels good. Many people find satisfaction and enjoyment out of making a difference in the world and being able to seek to be involved with social change for that reason. What do you think? Are there other things that we're missing? Are there other whys about why people get involved with social change? So I think one of the reasons why people don't get involved with social change is we've got this idea that it's just superhuman people, superheroes that get involved. And that if I don't identify as being that superhero, that I don't have something to offer. So the people who are most prominently attached to social change, they do often seem to have these superhuman qualities, which the average person does not typically identify. However, it's important to keep in mind that the average person truly can be involved in extraordinary activities related to social change. This ties back to the opening conversation that we had about college students who are engaging in social change. I think sometimes we think of social change as this big idea, this big concept, and we don't know how to unpack it. So what we're going to do now is really explore this idea of our personal spheres of influence. And so what I want you to do is individually, I'm going to pass out some blank paper and some markers, and I want you to create a model that represents your personal sphere of influence. And the reason why we're doing this is I've got it up there on the slide for you. The reason why we're doing this is I want you to be able to identify your personal spheres of influence, of the people who have influenced your ideas and experiences and who have been involved in your achievements. This will help serve to help you, inspire you to use your sphere of influence to be involved in social change. So let's start off, before you actually create your model, let's dig into this a little bit. What is a sphere of influence? How do you understand that? And then why do we describe it as a sphere and not a circle? Yep, that's all. Yep, you've got that. That's great. So talk to me a little bit about how have people influenced you and how have you influenced others? Can you give me some examples of that? Right, being asked to go to an organization meeting, getting involved in the residence hall, sure, those are great. Somebody tapping you for a leadership role. Oh, you inviting somebody. Yep, those are great examples. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is give you about 10 or 15 minutes to create your sphere, and then we'll do some reporting out after that. Thank you so much to all of you who have chosen to share your sphere. So let's just ask some general questions. Who ended up in your sphere of influence and why? And in what arenas do you have power to make something better? Were you able to recognize that? Okay, and then how could you use your sphere of influence to make change? Okay, and then in what arenas would you like to do things? Would you like things to be better? And then finally, how do you utilize your current sphere of influence to create change there? Excellent. Yep, those are all great thoughts. Thank you so much. So as we begin to think about this idea of social change, I want to be very clear that there are potential pitfalls in social change. Social change at times might create some unintended outcomes for both the individuals involved and the communities affected. And without the proper planning and knowledge going into the process, more harm may be done than good. So what does this look like? Paternalism, we talked about that earlier. Assimilation. A deficit-based perspective of the community, right? That we look at that community and think of everything that is wrong instead of recognizing what is right within that community. Seeking a magic bullet, that there's going to be this quick fix to making change. Or ignoring cultural differences. I need to be aware of how I show up as a white woman and looking at my identity and recognizing that there are differences in how I interact with different groups. So what I want you to do is think about a time when you were involved with a community effort that experienced one of these potential pitfalls. What might the project have looked like in order to avoid that pitfall? So take a minute to think, and then what I want you to do is turn to a partner and share.